Well, good morning, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us. And if you're watching this after the fact, we're thrilled to have you here. I always love doing these. This one, I think I say this on occasion, but this one's really exciting for me. Today we have John Roedel, who has written a book. We will talk some about this book, and he's also written a couple of other books, some poetry. John describes himself as a poet, a writer, a storyteller, and a terrible dancer. And I'll tell you, if we were doing this in person, I would make sure that we could prove that because, I think that's usually not true when people say that. So today we have John Roedel. Let me tell you a little bit about John. He is the author of Hey God, Hey John, What Happens When God Writes Back. And the book started as a blog on Facebook, and he describes it as a flippant way of making light of his doubts in the divine. And he tackles topics like mental health and wellness, faith, the lack of faith, joy, pain, raising a child with autism, and grief. It is a raw, funny, honest, delightful book to read, and hard because it's very emotional at moments and really funny. And I think God is the best therapist ever based on this book. So John has also authored two other books of poetry. The other one I think was in 2015 or 2018, maybe. I think 2015 was your first one, John. 2018, Any Given Someday. And your very recent, The Poetry of What Comes Next, which I have ordered and am very excited to get. And his newest remedy, a guerilla poet. It all comes to him in a rush. It sounds like you have these ideas, you sit down, you write them, and you send them immediately, so you can't really give it too much thought. It's just that flow. So I think that's fabulous. John penned The Anatomy of Peace, which is how I found John. We'll talk about that in a moment. It was formerly titled How to Live with My Body. In 25 minutes in a coffee shop, only to find out later that it had gone viral. John is delightful, really talks about the intersection of faith and mental health. I'm so happy to have you here today. Welcome, John Roedel. Hi there.
Howdy. That was the most loveliest introduction I think I could ever receive. That was so nice. I'm going to try to live up to all of that now.
Yeah, well, that's the expectation, right? I build it up because then I want you to be amazing. No, you're lovely and delightful. And, as a therapist, I think just as a person, I loved sitting down with your book and feeling something that was so real. So I just love that about you. So
thank you so much. Thank you. It's amazing to be here.
Well, our mutual pleasure, hopefully. So that's great. Nice to have you. So, as I mentioned, I was just kind of flipping through Facebook one day, as I think this has happened for many people, because when I mentioned that we were going to have you on, I got lots of comments from folks saying, oh, yay, is this going to be recorded? Which it is, and we'll put it up on YouTube. Because people said, I can't watch live, but I love this guy. I love his writing. I really want to see what he has to say. So you have a following, which I think you were a little surprised by. But
yeah, I'm definitely. What do I consider? I'm kind of an accidental writer. It wasn't something that I had thought of doing as a career, and it just kind of emerged from me, just starting about 5 or 6 years ago, and I've just kind of leaned into it. I fought it for a little while, and I've been leaning into it more and more recently.
That's fabulous. So how did you get this whole thing rolling? I'm sure people ask you this frequently, but so you sat down. I mean, you describe in your book, Hey God, Hey John, what happens when God writes back, that you were sitting down, you were having a real crisis of faith, really struggling with some depression. I mean, your father had died when you were younger than you should have been to lose your father. Your son being diagnosed with autism, and you had these real challenges and felt like God had sort of forsaken you.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great way of explaining it. I grew up Catholic, born and raised Catholic. In fact, I worked for a Catholic church for a while in my younger years. And faith for me was something that I thought I'd built this amazing foundation that when life got harder, because my life when I was a child growing up was probably set on easy, like beginner level. I didn't really have any problems or issues when I had a wonderful childhood. My parents were older, but they loved me. They gave me everything I wanted. And it wasn't until I started hitting my 20s when life started becoming more and more difficult, when hit by grief and hit by trauma and tragedy and setbacks and failures, that I thought, okay, I'm going to draw upon all this faith that I had been building, all these little little coins I put in the bucket that I could draw upon later when I needed them. I went to the well and there was nothing in there. I was digging in there and there was no, I don't know, the faith I thought would be there for me, all these things that I had built that I thought infrastructurally would be there for me later in my life. Everything just felt shallow and empty. All these things like, oh, just pray harder. Well, I was praying harder and it didn't really help. Just have more faith. I was trying to have faith. That sentiment didn't help.
Right.
And so, yeah, I mean, you explained it perfectly. I took this kind of frustration I had, both with like faith and like all these things I was told, oh, God and Jesus will be there for you later in life. Just wait for when you need, and they'll be there. And nothing was there. And I took that frustration to Facebook. Plus with the self-help community a little bit, I was buying every 10-step book I could find, because by the time I was reaching my 40s, I wasn't well. And I didn't notice I wasn't well until I started going to Facebook, and I was just going to poke fun at, easy answer, Hallmark gift card, faith, and, maybe easy answer, self-help therapy. And I went to Facebook and I was just kind of poking fun at it, having fake conversations with God, because I don't believe I am like some sort of divine prophet who's sitting by a burning bush or levitating in the clouds, speaking to doves and unicorns. I thought I'm just going to have these fake conversations with God where we're going to talk about, why I shouldn't wear skinny jeans or what was on Top Chef the night before, and just kind of make fun of the whole thing. And accidentally, while I was doing it, I was starting to put in little seeds of my real life in there and talking about real issues. Like I will remember specifically the first time I ever acknowledged I was experiencing depression was when I typed it out. And, I was having these fake conversations. At first, my friends and family were really nice about following along and giving you sympathy likes. But the more vulnerable, when I was being funny and stupid and, but the more vulnerable I became and the more I shared parts of my real life, our experience of raising a child living with a special need, my mental health crisis, my complete destruction of my faith world. And the more I was being honest about those things, strangers started showing up and saying, no, I understand that. Me too. And that was about 2015 when that started happening. And it wasn't something I expected or wanted to do. I teach improv. I like being on stage. I like making people laugh, making people feel sad, or not sad, but reflective, and maybe dealing with scars that they have. That wasn't necessarily anything I'd ever considered doing before. So this all kind of emerged organically. And the more I started writing these conversations, eventually God started responding to me in lyricism and lyrically. And then eventually poetry started coming through my fingers. And I'd never read poetry or studied poetry before. It just all started now I am. But now it just all happened very organically and accidentally. So the way you described it is perfect. It wasn't a vocation of mine. It kind of chose me.
It chose you, exactly. And hello to Marla and Winters. Thank you for joining us today. If you're there and have a question or a comment or just want to say hi, please pop it in the comments for us. But John, I'll tell you, that vulnerability that you put into this book, the honesty and the vulnerability, is so refreshing. A lot of what I think has happened during COVID is people are, and obviously before COVID too, but now people are really feeling this crisis, and we have to talk about it.
Yeah.
We have to make it okay for people to talk about it. And you've done that so that people can say, me too, right? Somebody's got to start, and you've started. So you started by talking to God, and I'll tell you, I was reading what God was saying back, and I thought, what a great therapist. Seriously, very impressive. And some of the things that you write about in terms of your depression, and talking about how, yes, your life was fairly uneventful in the beginning. Your father died and you had to put your dreams on hold. I mean, you came to this crisis in an honest way. So you write things like, the more I write about serious issues, the better I felt. The more I wrote about serious issues, the better I felt, and the more grounded I became. My simple dialogues gave voice to the monsters under my bed that had been begging to be heard, and that this journey transformed your life. Caricatures by sitting down and writing. And, because we talk to people about journaling and they're like, oh, journal schmurnal, who wants to do that? What a waste of time. I don't have anything to say. Or they look at the blank page and they, go numb.
Yeah.
But that idea of just sitting down and writing.
Yeah. No, I don't think writing replaces therapy, but my gosh, it's therapeutic. It helps me. And, it can be, I talk to other people about this. It can be, maybe journaling for them is painting. Journaling for me is painting for them, or writing music, or doing something, but you're accessing parts of your heart where there might be, like when I wrote, I look at it as I'm kind of going through an old mansion. I view my heart as like a mansion that's been closed up for years. And maybe I've only been living in a wing or two of it, but there's this whole other estate that's closed up, that's been boarded up, because I didn't want to go in there because there's scary noises or there's things moving at night. And I just so you make your world, you make your heart so small. And so when I write, it feels like when I write a new poem or something else, I imagine I'm tearing down a board in a room that I haven't been into, maybe ever. And I walk in and I'm exploring it for the first time. And so that's why, and I would never advise this for other writers, because, it's copyright issues and craziness on Facebook. But my process has always been, I will write something. I don't have like a notebook. I don't have another file. I don't use WordPress, or I write it on the Facebook little status thing. That's where I do all my writing. And I submit it immediately. Because if I sit there and I think about it too long, what's my neighbor going to think? Or what is my former teacher going to think? Or what's my relatives going to think? I live in a small town here in Cheyenne, Wyoming, of 60,000 people, and we're the biggest town in all of Wyoming. We're the capital city. We're like a city block in like New York, but we're the capital of a 500,000 person state. And so when I write these things, I always have in the back of my mind, what's someone going to say to me in the store? And, Mark Zuckerberg didn't create Facebook for 40-year-old men to have self-discovery, self-actualizing moments. He didn't create it for that. Facebook and social media is often used for, here's my perfect family and our perfect vacation, and here's my beautiful plate of food. What I was doing is like, here's my life. I'm a bit of a mess. I'm a work in progress. I'm not getting things right. I'm not saying popular things like, sometimes I don't believe in God, even though it's part of my upbringing, a part of my tradition and heritage, and part of my experience. There's been times when I felt really connected to the divine, but I was writing about times where I felt completely disconnected from that. And nobody really, in 2015, 2016, when I started, wanted to hear about that. And it's really funny that you mentioned, through the pandemic, my writing has really caught on with people. So I think your insight's right. And that's been mine as well. I've been writing about a lot of these things for about 3 or 4 years, but it was only in about the past year that I think an audience was caught on, connected, and experienced what I was going through earlier. And it kind of connected with them.
Completely. And I can see why. How many people were having that crisis of faith? And how many people have? I'll tell you, John, as a therapist, I hear people talk about their emotional life, but their spiritual life or lack thereof. And I will tell you, some of the people who suffer the most have zero faith, zero. And oh my gosh, I can't, that's not a road they've invited me to go down with them. Right. It's not my place, but at some point, we talk about their faith life, but that complete lack or the inability to even talk about it with people is an enormous block to them being able to find what you describe that you need, that we all need, which is hope. We've got to have some hope. And through your conversations with God, that's what's happened for you. It's like you've been able, I watched it evolve during the book, that ability to find more to believe in, to have some hope, which is just really delightful and lovely.
When I was writing those, and look, it's kind of, I'm still writing these conversations now, maybe not as many. I think I've written about 900 now, to 900 to 1300. And some I'll only keep for myself. But the word I would use when the heart of it, especially in the Hey God, Hey John book, those I was writing out of desperation. And I didn't know I was desperate at the time. I didn't know I was searching for things. I was told to find God in these places growing up. And then when I went to find God in those places, I couldn't find it. I couldn't find that relationship. So these conversations are very much how I would picture me and the divine sitting down for a cup of coffee, and how I would write things that I think my heart was so desperate to hear. I was writing things that I have never, like some of the things coming from the God character, I had never thought about before. It wasn't like I had these notes and was like, oh, I need to put these in a conversation to make it readable. I was discovering these things as I was writing them in real time, without editing them, and I would put them out immediately without thought. But it's all based out of emotion. Every piece that you read, I felt that exactly while I was reading it. It wasn't an analytical, oh, I'm going to look back and have a post-mortem of how I felt and crack it open. Everything I write from the moment how I feel it. And that's where it's all based out of emotion. And so, yeah, those posts, each of those posts, I can't read many of them. I don't really go back and read it because I can remember, I can completely empathize with how I was as I wrote those things. And I like to keep moving forward. And while I'm still writing about those themes and those self-discoveries, I try not to go back and read them too often, because it'll bring me right back to where I was.
Yeah, right. And it's a place that you were in the moment, but by doing this process, you worked your way through it.
Yeah.
So I can appreciate that you don't necessarily need to go back and do that. I love how you wrote about the dishwasher debacle. That to me was just kind of a funny story, but can you talk about the dishwasher debacle?
I think that piece is a lot about.
As I take you back to a lousy, you just said, I don't like to go back.
No, I'm trying to, that's the one where I broke the dishwasher, and then I tried to fix the dishwasher, and I kept breaking it even further. And that's something I do, and I'm still working on in my life, is I try to feel like I have control over everything. And it's the idea of giving up the things that I don't have control over. I can't control that my dishwasher was backing up our entire house and eventually into the sewer system, and me trying to fix it, like almost ruining my relationships with neighbors across the townhouse area, because it was destroying the entire infrastructure of our neighborhood. The more I tried to fix it myself.
That's funny.
But no, it was my wife would not have found it very funny. My teenage children found it hilarious. But yeah, I kept trying to have control over everything in my life, and it's about letting go, and it's okay for things to mess up, and it's okay to be a hot mess, because here's the thing that nobody talks about. We're all on this planet of 8 billion people trying to figure things out all at the same time, and everyone acts like they know what they're doing, and we're all great at pretending that we've done this before, and we're amazing at it, but we're all figuring this out together. There's almost as many people living here now as ever lived in all the course of human history before combined, that are living here presently right now, and we're all trying to figure things out. And it's okay to say, I don't know what the heck I'm doing. It's okay to say, I'm a little bit of a mess. And so that's where I'm at. And that's what I think that post was born out of, is like, a lot of men like to fix things. And here was a man saying, I don't know how to make it repair something or fix something.
Exactly right. You were saying, I'm not only that, I'm making it worse. And as you, this is kind of a longer post.
Yeah.
You're talking about, and this was part of what caught me, because this is what we as humans can do. And then you're down this path of all the tragedies that are going to happen. And then this horrible thing is going to happen. And then the next horrible thing is going to happen. And then it's going to just go downhill.
still the road I'm on. And I was talking about this with a friend yesterday. My default thing is something good happens. I'm thinking, oh, what's bad going to happen now? This is a trap. Oh, someone gets a hold of me with a great opportunity. I'm like, oh, this is all a thing. I'm going to be in the trunk of their car. It's a serial killer concept. I mean, it's your imagination, and it's weaponizing our imagination for the wrong reasons. And as a creative, that's a lot of the pitfalls I fall into, is you start imagining 10, 12, 15 steps ahead and thinking it's all going to be a disaster. When I should be living in the present moment more and experiencing the now. And that's, I can't change the past, can't fix the future, but I can embrace right now in this moment.
Absolutely. But see, these are all things that we need. I think all of us need. I've been a therapist for 30 some years. These are things that people need to know, that people need to be able to practice over and over and over again. I mean, this is a thick book. You've been writing many, many, many posts. This takes a lot of practice and iterations. And what can happen is people say, well, I journaled a couple of pages and it didn't work. Or, I prayed a couple times and it didn't work.
Right.
I also like how you wrote about your depression. I mean, you've suffered, John, for crying out loud. Clearly, you've really struggled with this depression, and you write about it in a way that really, again, it was like this punch in the emotional solar plexus, right? You were saying this is not a war, that people go to war with their mental health. They go to war with their faith. Either they use their faith for war, or they go to war with, trying to have it. And your discussion of this is not a war. Can you describe that for folks about how you came to embrace the existence of your own depression and your own struggles?
Yeah. First, I hid from it, and I didn't know I had it. There was a rot under the hardwood floors for years, and I didn't know there was this black mold under there until one day I accidentally cracked open a piece, and then I saw, oh my gosh, it's an infestation of it. It was filled. I was riddled with this darkness that I had never thought about before or embraced. So first I denied it and hid from it. And then when I discovered it, it was a confrontational kind of thing. And that was where I think I struggled with some of the early self-help I was getting, and maybe some of the advice I was getting is like, oh, you need to fight it every day and you need to defeat it and crush it. And like a little bit of male, I live in cowboy culture here in Wyoming. A lot of let's put some dirt on it and wrap yourself in barbed wire and you'll be fine. And I probably tried that for a while and it didn't work, and it made it worse. And the more I made a relationship with it, I spoke to it. I asked my depression. In fact, I have tons of posts where it's not, hey, God, hey, John. It's, hey, depression, hey, John. And we would have back and forth conversations about why am I experiencing this? Where did you come from? Where are we going? And at first they were all angry, me yelling and depression.
Yeah, what do you want from me?
Yeah. And it was more, I want you out of my life. And the more I wrote and the more I had these conversations, the more it became, I needed to build a bridge with it. We needed to learn to live together. It wasn't something that I was going to get rid of like a cold. It might disappear for a season or two. I might forget it's there, but then the wrong song on the radio plays, or the barometric pressure changes, or whatever it is that can trigger it. And that's always a mystery to me, but it can be anything. Then I need to know who it is, and I need to know how we're going to communicate with one another. And that's how I looked at it, is like, this is a part of me. It's not an attacking infection that I need to get rid of with penicillin. It's a part of my brain and heart that will always be there. And it's kind of, every time it shows up, I think of it as untangling a knot. Okay, you're here. Let's figure out, okay, why are you tight this way? Let's figure it out this way. And it's a little bit of a puzzle. And some days the puzzles takes a year to get rid of. Some days it takes a couple hours. But I think you're right. It wasn't a fighting, combative attitude. It was more of a negotiation, and let's learn to live with one another. Right,
like a roommate. I mean, you describe, God as a roommate, your depression as a roommate, doubt can be a roommate, right? You write to doubt, you in doubt of faith, and have a conversation, or, what's the point? So, right, all of these are roommates, and thinking about us having to live with ourselves versus we have to defeat parts of ourselves. That's such a huge takeaway, John. I mean, that that alone, right? If we can make peace with it, it doesn't mean we give up, it doesn't mean
Yeah.
we give in, but we make peace. It's not a war. That just,
Right.
I love that.
Yeah, you can't. It's not the idea of you're surrendering. Oh, this is it for me, and I'll never feel. It's being desperate, and that's what I said that earlier. It's desperate to wanting to keep living, to wanting to keep feeling the light on your skin, to wanting to have hope, to wanting to have something to look forward to. And some days you have to be desperate, and you have to find things. You have to desperately find how you're going to untangle that knot. For me, it was writing. For some people, it's riding horses. For some people, it's cooking. For some people, it's, what family, whatever it is. And for me, it was writing, and it was all about being desperate.
Yeah, right. And taking that desperation and that despair and trying to figure out how can I channel it? What can I do for myself here? It's
Right.
fabulous. So I would love for you to read that poem that I originally mentioned. But before we do that, if you could take one moment, John, what is the one thing, I said, I think these things are really important. What is the one thing that you would most hope that people would take away from your writing, from these conversations? What would you hope?
I would hope, and this is what so I think I was writing to myself from the future when I was writing these things. And I kind of mean that facetiously, but I kind of don't. At the time when I felt as bad as I felt at rock bottom, I didn't think there was anything past that. That there was just this, and this is how it's going to be forever. I'm in a storm. I'm in the long night. The storm will never end. The daybreak will never come. It is always going to be like this. Despair, and that's the most sinister thing about despair, is it feels like, it's digging in roots, and it will never, ever go. It's something that's going to be here forever. And when you're in it, of course, that's how it feels. But I was writing to myself, I think from the future back to myself, saying, this is not forever. This is just for right now. That our mental health, and that's what I try to remind myself too, when I feel like, I'm feeling great, and I've been on such a roll lately, and I don't have these dark thoughts. I have to remind myself, yeah, but that's not forever either. That's the beautiful, miraculous thing about this life, is there's waves of it. Things come and go and ebb and flow, and you have to know that it's not always going to be like this. And so that's what I would tell someone. And that's what I think when I write these, when I put these little Facebook messages or Instagram posts and posts, I try to write something new every day. And I think of it as putting a little message in a bottle and just putting it in the ocean. And if it gets on someone's shore who needs it, amazing. And what I want them to know is that this is how you feel right now, is not forever. And it's not who you are. Like sometimes we put our identity, I'm a sad person and that's who I am. I have depression, that's who I am. I should put it on my driver's license. I should wear a name tag. Right. Hi, I'm John, I have depression. No, that's not who you are. Who you are is so much more than that. This is just one of the little mosaics in your tile of who you are. And so when I write, I desperately want people to know that if you identify with these posts and how I feel and the sadness that I felt, just know I'm writing from the other side of it now. And I'll go back into it. It's not from a hierarchy standpoint of, I know everything and look, I'm an expert at it. No, I know I'll be back in it again. But this is a reminder that it comes and goes, and the sadness and this despair won't last forever.
Yeah, love that. Oh, John, wonderful. What a great message. So would you mind reading The Anatomy of Peace again? This is how I found you. I can't wait to hear you read it.
It's this post, I had a couple of things go viral in my writing life before, and this one definitely was a little bit more super viral, I guess is how they describe it. So you kind of explained it earlier. It was this past August. I just wrote it a few months ago. And we were a 1-car family, and I was picking up my wife from work in about 30 minutes, 25 minutes. And I was at a coffee shop. And like I explained before, I get these moments where I feel something, but I can't quite identify why I feel that way. And so I usually write to help me kind of put my thumb on it. It's like it's a seance with myself. So I'm trying to connect with my emotions, trying to figure what is going on. What can I tune into here? And so I was having a bit of a panic attack, anxiety. I was nervous, but there was nothing acutely to say why I was feeling that way. I didn't have something happen. It was just this general anxiety that we probably all have felt over the last couple of years of, I don't have control. I feel helpless. So I sat down at a coffee shop and I wrote this in 25 minutes. And then I didn't edit it. I closed up my laptop because I was running out of time. And I just tucked it away and picked up my wife, went about the rest of my day. And then by the time I checked it that night, it had been shared like 1,000 times. I thought, oh, that's really great. And then by the morning, it was like 40,000 times. And within a couple of days, it was 100,000 times. And people reached out from all over the world. It's one of those beautiful messages of like how powerful Facebook and social media can be, how terrifying it can be if it's the wrong message. But this one traveled the world. People from New Zealand had me contacting and going into their group sessions that like within days. And like, it was amazing how quickly it traveled around the world. And not because I'm a genius or anything amazing like that. It's because I think it's just people can identify with exactly how I felt in that moment. And so, yeah, without any further, I named the piece that because it had gone viral. I don't really name my pieces ever just because then they feel like they're done and I can't play with them. And I always feel like they have wet paint on them and I'm still messing with them. So this is that poem that connected us and connected me to a lot of people. And it's certainly been amazing. But here we go. My brain and heart divorced a decade ago over who was to blame about how big of a mess I have become. And eventually they couldn't be in the same room with each other. Now my head and my heart share custody of me. I stay with my brain during the week and my heart gets me on weekends, but they never speak to each other. Instead, they just give me the same note to pass to the other one every week. And their notes, well, they always say the same thing. They say, "This is all your fault." On Sundays, my heart complains about how my head has let me down in the past. And on Wednesdays, my head lists all of the times my heart has screwed things up for me in the future. They blame each other for the state of my life. And there's been a lot of yelling and crying. So lately, I've been spending a lot more time with my gut, who kind of serves as my unofficial therapist. Most nights, I sneak out of the window in my rib cage and I slide down my spine and I collapse on my gut's plush leather chair that's always open for me. And I just sit until the sun comes up. But last evening, my gut asked me if I was having a hard time being caught between my head and my heart, and I nodded. I said I didn't know if I could live with either of them anymore. My heart is always sad about something that happened yesterday, while my head is always worried about something that might happen tomorrow, I lamented. My gut just squeezed my hand, but I continued. I said, I just can't live with my mistakes of the past or my anxiety about the future. Well, my gut smiled at me and said, in that case, I think you should go stay with your lungs for a while. And I was confused, and the look on my face gave it away. But my gut said, if you're exhausted about your heart's obsession with the fixed past and your mind's focus on an uncertain future, then your lungs are the perfect place for you. There's no yesterday in your lungs. There's no tomorrow there either. There's only now. There's only inhale. And there's only exhale. And there's only this moment, and there's only breath. And in that breath, you can rest for a while your heart and your head figure things out. So this morning, while my brain was busy reading tea leaves, and while my heart was going through old photographs, I packed up a little bag and I walked to the door of my lungs. And before I could even knock, she opened the door, and with a smile and as a gust of wind embraced me, she said, "What took you so long?"
John, thank you so much for that. Few things move me to tears these days because there's so much, but every time I read that and to hear you recite it, thank you for doing that for us. John Roedel, poet, writer, storyteller, brave, vulnerable, wonderful soul. Thank you so much for being here with us
Oh
today.
my gosh, it's such an honor. I'm so grateful. Thank you so much. This is wonderful.
My pleasure. So hopefully we will stay connected, John. I wish you lived closer, but let's stay connected. Thank you for those of you who are with us here today. If you would like to connect with John, so many wonderful insights throughout your writing. A good daily mantra, sharing thank you. That's wonderful. Thanks, Marla. Writing. Yes, I thought that's what you meant. Yeah. So thank you so much, Marla, for being here. And anyone else who's watching, to get a hold of John, Deanna, can you put back up John's information, please? Deanna, thank you. Our producer, johnroedel.com. And is it Big John, Facebook at Big John, Big John. There we go. Wonderful. And Instagram, there's your Instagram handle as well. Thank you so much, John. Everyone have a wonderful day. Thank you for being with us. Be well.
Bye.